everyone. I think it's 10 o'clock, so we'll get started. I don't know who should be here that's not here, but obviously everyone knows the time when the meeting starts, don't they? So we'll just start.
Grace will join us at her right chair.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everybody. Safety information, there's no fire alarm plan, so one does go off. I think you all know where to go down by the cathedral. And we'll just start with a round of introductions. So I don't know if everybody knows everybody here. So my name's Councillor Dudd. I'm the chair of this committee and also the councillor for Southmead. Just go around to my right.
Mark Jetson, digital HR.
Good morning, James Grandson from Human Resources.
Morning everybody, Stephanie Finn, the Director of Workforce and Change. Morning, Councillor Jones from Human Resources. And Sam Cameron from Friendships.
Rob Butler from Union.
Paul Charlie Usen, Councillor Joss Park, Brisbane West.
Councillor O'Rourke from Clifton.
Councillor David Woodward, please.
Councillor O'Rourke from Northwest.
I'm Colin Blake and Sally for Campbells today, and David Caxton for Hillfields.
I've been my councillor for
Jerome Thomas, Councillor for Clifton.
Councillor Richard Eddy, Bishopsbrook.
Magdalena Wood, Democratic Services Office.
Right, well, welcome everybody. Good to see you all. As Kelvin said, we've only got one apology for the absence. Councillor Kerry Bowles. So Kelvin's subbing. So we'll just move on to items. So we've got some. This is the AGM of the HR committee. So we've got some formalities just to go through. So item 3 is confirmation of chair and vice chair. So that's myself and Councillor O'Rourke, the other end there. This is just to note because obviously we've already been elected by full council. So can we note that? Thank you. And then of course the item 4, the committee membership for this year. Obviously, can we note that as well? I'm happy to do that. Thank you. And then item 5 is the meeting dates for the year. So there's been a change to the dates here. So unwittingly, well, I don't know, we should have known that. We had a meeting scheduled for the 11th of November. So we decided that we would change that. So the next meeting is now on the 21st of October, but the other 2 dates remain as planned previously. Everybody happy with that?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 6, terms of reference for the committee. I don't think there's been any changes to the terms of reference, so we continue as before. We all happy to note that?
Aye.
Thank you. And then we'll move on to item 7, declaration of interests. Does anybody have any interest to declare in relation to the agenda today? No? Okay, thank you. And then we'll move on to minutes of the previous meeting to agree. We do have an action tracker as well as part of the minutes. So firstly, is everybody happy with the minutes? Can we agree with the minutes? And then we'll move on to the action tracker just to see if there's anything that's come up through that. So thanks for agreeing with the minutes. Steph, is there anything you want to sort of mention? The 4-day week was potentially something you wanted to mention. That's on the action tracker here.
So that's come up to a couple of recent meetings. What we've done is prepared a briefing then for members, and I circulated that with the actions from the last meeting. Obviously, it's happy to pick up offline if anybody would like to have further conversation around that.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any other items they want to discuss on the action tracker? No? Okay. Sorry, Paula. Yeah.
I'm just make a point, it's a very positive point. I've been on a fair number of committees over my life, and often we find the action tracker is the one thing that always has to be followed up on, and often you go to the next meeting and people say, oh yeah, no, that's it, by the way, we need to do this. And I'd just like to commend whoever it is in this committee who's on the officer side, who's managing this, because with great diligence, these papers and those appeared in our inboxes. So I'd just like to make that comment, is that, I've never really known such diligence in doing that.
Well, no, because everything's being dealt with, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some meetings, some committees, it's like we'll deal with that sometime in the future or whatever. So yeah,
Very good administration.
good work. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on. So we've got the work programme for the year. We've discussed this at the agenda conference meeting already. So obviously we've got this month's meeting.
Chair.
Yeah, sorry.
You've
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. So thanks everybody for reminding me. How can I forget public? So sorry, we do have public forum. So I was getting a little bit excited there. So I've had 3 questions in from Dan Apple, who's obviously you call it the public gallery at the back. It's a bit grand. So just on, you've obviously had a written response. So I'll just go through each question in order. So do you have a supplementary to the first question?
I can't remember which order they were in.
Okay, I'll just remind you. So question 1 is on stretching space.
Yeah,
Do you have a supplementary on?
I would like to, but I think I need to spend the 2 supplementary questions I have
Okay.
on
The other 2.
on the other 2. Yeah. The next one was the
So question 2 is the remuneration of directors. Do you have a supplementary?
Well, I've got 2 supplementaries, but first, as a point of order, I don't fully understand the answers. Can I check my understanding is correct before asking a supplementary?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that the answer given says that basically the person was given a pay rise, and that was applied retroactively to not just the previous months, but also the previous year of their employment.
Yeah. So Steph, I don't know if you want to.
Just to clarify, the role was regraded, and this was effective from a date in the previous year. However, the payment for that regrade was paid in 23-24. So it was effectively the back pay.
Okay. So the first supplementary question would be, another thing that confuses me, in the pay policy statement for 23-24 it says that requests for increases in pay for executive directors and directors that are within 10% of the minimum of the relevant range can be approved by the chief executive. Requests for any other changes to the pay of executive directors or directors will be determined by the Human Resources Committee. The change to the Director of Homes and Landlord Services seems quite a bit more than 10%. Did his regrading come before this committee?
I think Steph will follow on from me, but I think there's a when there's a regrading of a position, that's a matter for the chief executive. That's my understanding of it. We're often consulted on it. I think if it was for a pay rise within a grade, then that would be a matter for us. But when there's been a regrading, that's a matter for the chief executive. But I wasn't the chair of the HR committee at the time, but I assume the person that was the chair or the committee would have potentially been consulted informally on that. So I'll just let Steph on.
Yeah, I think the distinction here is that it was a re-evaluation of the role, and that is done in accordance with our pay policy statement. So it is the chief executive's decision to approve a re-evaluation of the role, but the decision to implement that would be one for the selection committee, and they were approached about the decision to implement that grade.
So the selection committee that appointed that individual would have been consulted.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good.
Do you so both the supplementaries on that question?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So another thing that I'm confused by is that in the document Bristol City Council senior employees as at 31st December 2023, it says the Director of Homes and Landlord Services was level 3 and being paid £114,000 as at 31st of December 2023. So at some point in 24, after the massive debacle, which was the evacuation of Barton House, this gentleman somehow negotiated a huge pay rise, which was also retroactively applied to his previous year's salary. I would have thought that he'd been in a very weak negotiating position. What was the extra £64,000 for?
Okay, I don't know if you want to say something about that re-evaluation process there.
I just point out as well, this would have been in his notice period, because I'm assuming directors have 3 months notice, and he left in February. His last day was in February 24, so this renegotiation of his salary would have been in his notice period.
So yeah, I don't think there's any connection with the two issues, if I'm honest with you.
So what was the pay rise
yeah,
for?
if you look at that position, that was the kind of senior officer within that service.
Okay.
And if you can see, subsequently we've appointed an executive director for that position. So I think the view was the responsibility that that individual had wasn't graded correctly, and that's been borne out by the fact that we've appointed a much senior person to run that service in subsequent months. So from my point of view, it's a genuine review of the actual work that individual was doing and then matching it into an appropriate grade. And
I don't think that makes much sense. I think this looks like a payoff to get him to go away quietly. I will be FOIing the relevant documents, but this just looks disgraceful.
That's just speculation, isn't it? Okay, so obviously you've got a third question in, but you've obviously used your 2 supplementaries, so we'll move on. So we've got item 10, trade union forum. Not received anything officially from trade unions this time. Is there any other items on the agenda you think you might comment on when we get to them?
I couldn't see anything that jumped out.
Okay, all right.
Making comments in relation to what we just discussed, but I don't know if that's appropriate.
No, we'll move on, thank you. Okay. Right, so back to where I jumped ahead to. So we've got the work programme. Is everybody happy with the work we've got outlined for the year?
Chairman,
Sorry.
I haven't served on this committee for a number of years. I think it's important we have some regular so we can have staff which comes to us. And in my view, that's the case here. There's one omission, I believe. We do receive an annual report from the self-organised groups. Obviously, separately, we have an online discussion with them, but we do have one report per year which comes here.
Yeah, okay, we can fit that in. Is there, would you say there's a good time for that? The February meeting?
Possibly that agenda looks a little lighter, doesn't it? But we can speak to the chairs of our staff groups as well to see how that fits.
Yeah, okay. And Trent?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I suppose my starting point is that what we're trying to create is a high-performing organisation, and that human resources as a function is actually central to creating a high-performing organisation. And in that light, we've got kind of a workforce strategy that is coming to each of the meetings with no actual clear outcomes spelled out in the full plan. So, I mean, when we're looking at things like, for example, the staff survey, I don't see how we can do a staff survey if we don't have a workforce strategy that we're actually trying to link into, and so that we're asking questions about, staff happiness and, questions related to the workforce strategy. Are we working to an existing workforce strategy, and can we also feed into the questions around what's going into the staff survey? Because it all needs to channel into a high-performing, effective organisation.
Yeah, of course.
So yes, we have a new workforce strategy. It was agreed at Strategy and Resources Committee yesterday. So we've got an agenda item for me to give you a verbal update. It is absolutely our intention that each meeting we will bring you a progress update with an action plan that will supplement the strategy. And I think what we'll do is use each meeting to maybe identify an area where you might want to focus in at the next meeting. And the annual staff survey, we do primarily try and keep questions the same each year so that we can really track our progress. We've got now 6 years sort of trends to be able to bring you that analysis, but absolutely that will be one of our main tools for assessing whether or not we're achieving our ambitions in the strategy. So we can make that combined discussion at the meeting.
And has this committee been consulted on the workforce strategy?
Yes, we've brought 2 items over the last year for you to input into priorities. And then at various stages I've sent all members a copy of the draft, including the one that went forward for strategy and resources. So it was felt that we wanted that to be signed off by policy committee against strategy and resources, but of course HR committee were a big input into that. And so we've been sending a draft copy sort of offline between meetings to be able to consider.
So actually to do better homework.
Yeah. Tim and Calvin.
Just something that goes to me, sort of got scrutiny, some concern that the hardening of the capacity of ICBs will impact on our staff, even frontline staff, in more assessment and certain aspects of provision of staff. I just wonder if it's worth putting a bit of stock taken on that, which could be a major impact on our workforce and adult social care.
So the impact of the ICB changes?
We don't really know what they are.
No.
But I mean, maybe it's something like just to translate if it is impacting on our workforce.
Yeah, okay.
It
That's,
might just be a good no, but you know, that's useful to market.
okay. Thank you. And then Calvin.
So I sat on the ICB people committee actually, quite a lot of percentage, just because I think actually changing the ICB is really helpful rather than hindrance. So that, as a side, I just wondered, I mean, Steph, I think I welcome your point about when we have the strategy updates, the possibility of being able to look at particular areas, and that I think that makes sense. Because for me, there's stuff like talent management that I'm missing on this, sort of making sure that we have a sustainable workforce, you know, and how we ensure that we've got a plan of action should people leave and all the rest of it. So there's space in this, I think, for deep dives, which I think is really important as an organisation. This committee particularly has to look at some areas that maybe are hot spots, you know, around sickness and all the rest of it. So for me, this isn't, you've got space within this, right, to do that stuff, but you don't necessarily have to codify it all. It's sort of just a commitment to do that kind of work, and I think it's really important to go to places where there's tension in the organisation, and also stuff which perhaps, you know, where we've gone through issues and we've learned stuff around it, understanding what we did to resolve that stuff. So welcome the point that Richard made about making sure we've got space in the agendas to do that. It might be that as we go we understand what those issues are, we can kind of then update the pack to actually specifically say what we're going to cover on.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, you also, the point was made about, you know, we're quite flexible with this agenda, so if things do come up during the year, we can respond and add things to the agenda. Yeah, the one thing that probably has stuck into because it was raised at full council, wasn't it? Was around pay gaps. So concern was raised that actually it might not be heading in the right direction. I think it was Councillor Weston raised that. So potentially at some point, maybe in February, because that you say is looking a bit like maybe we have a report on pay gaps.
Sorry, just a very quick question on that. If someone who just happens to know the answer, I wanted to know how the pay gap is calculated, whether it's a case of we're just looking at the average wage of, say, women or men, or team managers and seeing whether there's disparity there, or if it's like a holistic approach of women are being more likely to be employed within lower paying jobs. Do we know how it's calculated?
Yes, it is the latter, but I think I'll invite Mark Jefferson, our data expert, to cover that for you.
Yeah, so we've got a Power BI report that's set up, so we look at the organisation as a whole, and then we can drill down into that, so we can look at quartiles, and we can look at by job type, or directorate or service as well. So it's something that we kind of review across the piece.
Okay.
Mark, sorry, just in relation to calculating the gender pay gap.
There's
A pay gap.
sure. So there's kind of set criteria in terms of how that median is calculated and what we include and exclude. For example, if people are off on short-term sick or there's maternity leave, then that's getting from that. But in terms of it looks at, so for the median it's looking at the average for all employees, the median is looking at that midpoint. So if we kind of line them all up in a list,
All right, sorry, can I just cut in? So this is a debate about what work we want to come to the committee in the future. So we'll bring an item on the pay gap in the future. I'll take Rob, then I'll move on after that.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was trying to find, I know the workforce strategy had been shared with us previously for comment, unfortunately I can't find it at the moment. So I just wanted to, in relation really to Councillor Wise said about the impact on workforce. I've raised in other forums concerns about how the council is protecting employees from stress levels. So I just want to make the statement really that I hope the strategy involves that, because a massive improvement is needed throughout the authority on carrying out stress risk assessments, which obviously will, you've got happy workforce are going to be providing service delivery much better.
So we've got the workforce strategy coming up. Steph's going to give a verbal update on that,
Yes.
so we can pick up that one in that item. So I'm going to move on, but as I said, this is quite flexible, so if things do come up during the year, we can respond to it. So can we note that the work programme? Thank you. I'll hand over to James now for item 12, which is HR committee annual report to the full council.
Many thanks, Chair. Yes, this is another of the annual tasks undertaken by the committee to report on its work over the preceding year to full council. I've updated your committee's report from last year to reflect the things that were debated during the course of that year. There are very few changes from the last report, so I'm happy to. I am your servant in this, so if you want to change it, let me know.
Okay, I've got Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Eddy.
Thank you, Chair. As a group whip, I would like a consensus from this committee about whether they actually want to have a round of speakers about the HR report. Because there was a difference of opinion that was slightly embarrassing for members.
Yeah, well, I think this should be. We should have a round of speakers on it. Well, that's my opinion. Yeah, so I'll make sure our whips informed of that.
Could it be noted that there's the minutes?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Eddy.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank James? It looks like to be a comprehensive review of our work programme. What I would say, I'm probably going to sound like a long playing record here, though I appreciate you need to be a patron of a retro store to know what I'm talking about. I know our hard-working officers are notoriously bashful, especially our James, who has again referred to himself as someone who works in HR rather than the head of HR. But could I suggest we have a line saying we would like to thank the support, particularly of Steph, James and Mark?
Yeah, more than happy to include that in the report. Are you happy to make that addition? Or is it a bit too bashful to do that?
I am the committee servant. I would like to.
Okay.
Thank you.
So a bit on like which was saying, it feels a little bit underwhelming. I think this is an overlooked committee, and it actually does oversee employment and rights and everything else of quite a lot of staff. So I just would like to pick this up a little bit in the introduction, actually, to say, you know, about why this is an important committee and just often overlooked. I'll let James do the praise.
I'm happy
To promote ourselves a bit more.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on this item? No? Okay. Thanks everyone. So we'll note that. And we're on to the workforce strategy. So obviously this committee fed into that over the last year, but the final decision sat with the Strategy and Resources Committee who met yesterday, and they've adopted the strategy. So it's just sort of an update on where we got to with the final version. And obviously everyone had the chance that was set out before the publication date, so everybody on this committee had the chance to make any final comments on it. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to reiterate my thanks to HR committee members for your input into the priorities over the last year, and indeed all of our colleagues. We ran focus groups with managers and staff, with our chairs and members of our staff-led groups, our trade union colleagues. So we really felt that this was a strategy sort of that was developed with and for our workforce. As the Chair said, it went to Strategy and Resources Committee yesterday. I'm pleased to confirm that it was unanimously approved. We'll be shortly getting an official email from Nick, our Chief Exec, just to let you know it's been approved, and I'll give that final one. But as I say, you do have a copy in your ring boxes from my most recent update. So just as a recap there, this is an internal document. It sits beneath the corporate strategy, and it's essentially there to ensure that we have the right resources and the right skills in place in order to deliver on our corporate strategy priorities, and of course in turn to deliver for the residents of the city. The strategy is high-level commitments to guide our work on culture, recruitment and retaining talent, investing in our colleagues' development and their skills for the future, and also improving equity and inclusion. So it is sort of high-level commitments and priorities, and what we're working on now is an associated action plan. So that's going to really give us the detail of how and when we're going to bring those commitments to life with tangible action. And that's what we want to be bringing to HR committee at regular intervals, so our progress against that action plan and potentially any deep dive into any areas of interest. Noting the comments earlier around stress for our colleagues, we do make one of our priorities is about continuing to improve the health, safety and wellbeing of colleagues. We've got a whole section devoted to that, and we recognise that stress, anxiety and depression are currently the most common reasons for sickness in the organisation, and so we're prioritising that as an area that we want to work on. So really it was just to thank you for your input and to say that we will be keeping you regularly appraised of our progress through the work programme in future meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Dudd.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at it. I mean, it looks great. It's a really good piece and really helpful tool organisation. If we had a one-page overview of it, that would be really good, because then we can kind of rate the different components of it.
So we do, it's not obviously very legible here, but we do have a planning page within there which lists the 4 key priorities and then the key objectives against each. But I think, yes, when we bring you updates, we can use this as a tool.
And I think it
to
also
do that
helps
update.
with what Calvin was saying around which of the areas that we want to deep dive into. I don't think we need to see the full strategy every time, just having a kind of a one-page view gives us the ability to dive in, knowing that detail is sitting behind it. I think going back to the workforce survey, I hear what you say about the continuity in the questions, and absolutely need that to put tracks up over time. But with that new workforce strategy in place, there might be 2 or 3 new questions that we want to add to reflect that workforce strategy, the new workforce strategy. So if this committee could see the suggested list of questions and any proposed new questions that you would be thinking of asking, then it would be helpful for us to be able to comment on that.
Yes.
And then kind of like my final question is really linked to target operating model of the organisation, and that's something that's kind of particularly in the finance subcommittee. What is the shape of the organisation that we want to create? And I'm not sure quite where that's sitting or what HR's function in that is and should be. So I just kind of wonder, workforce strategies would be quite a good place to sort of comment on target operating model.
Yes, so we referenced that in the strategy. The framework from an HR perspective is really guiding how we align our sort of resources and our skills to the right place for what we need for the future. The operating framework is that it's not a new structure for the organisation, it's really just organising how we adapt to what's needed for the future and will inform the transformation programmes and reports on our transformation programmes go by our committee. Obviously, the role for HR in that is ensuring that when we do make any localised decisions about service redesign, that we do make sure we've got those operating framework principles in mind, and so we will be supporting that purpose in HR function.
So just to clarify, you're saying that the leadership is really coming from the leadership function of the organisation rather than from HR, and that HR is primarily serving work that is taking place somewhere else around optimal target operating model.
Yeah, we're working alongside with the Chief Executive on what that looks like. It's still sort of emerging work, but yes, HR has a place at that table. Yeah, absolutely.
And then obviously we've got the update on the actual action plan coming to the next meeting. And obviously our role is also to scrutinise performance against the strategy and the plan. I think it's a great document, really positive. But obviously the devil's going to be in the detail of the delivery, isn't it? And there's some big challenges outlined there in terms of making sure the organisation reflects the city, making us an employer of choice, and so there's a lot of major tasks ahead of ourselves on that. It's a good piece of work. So Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks, Steph, for delivering that, and apologies again for jumping the gun on the stress side of things. You say high-level commitment, and that's good to hear, but based on some of the issues that you're aware of recently, I'm currently carrying out a staff survey in Temple Street, and the issues that I raised before, like at Sandy Park, is what's becoming obvious is the middle level commitment, for want of a better description, of the actual local management, in particular Temple Street. And some of the responses is coming back with work they've been known for quite some time. To me, I may be naive, but they're pretty simple fixes, but local management just seems to be struggling with it for whatever reason. So I think that's an area where we need to focus a lot more. It's great to have it from high level, but management further down the line needs to be committed as well.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Yeah. So we've got a workforce strategy. Have the key performance indicators been updated to reflect progress in the workforce strategy?
So we're currently looking at the performance framework at the moment in light of the new corporate strategy, and I believe there's work with members as well to see what KPIs you'd like to see as part of that. So yes, we want to make sure that we not only use what our colleagues are telling us for our staff survey in terms of our progress, but also make sure we've got some KPIs that really reflect some of our commitments in here. So we're actively looking at that now. There will be some organisational health type metrics. be taking place sort of over the summer and probably early autumn, so if there's something that we may need to do offline between that to consult the members, we can do that.
I think that would be really useful, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? No? Well, yeah, once again, thank you for all your work on this. It's obviously been a very collaborative process and lots of people have been consulted, including this committee, very, very closely. So even though we weren't the final decision makers, I think we all sort of appreciate the input we've had on this. So thank you. So we move on to item 14. So we've got the apprenticeship strategy and an update on apprenticeships. Are you presenting anything, Sana, or?
You can have it on the screen if you like.
Yeah, so I'll just move out of the way, but over to you, Mark.
Just to say, this is the same as the papers that members have, so if you're not able to see the screen, you can put it on. Okay, thank you. So there's a bit of background around our apprenticeships and how we deliver them. Previously, if I go back to 2022, we were looking at expiry of the levy, so having to send money back. We sent 190 back in 2022. We then managed to reduce that and sent 81k back, and from 2024 and 2025 we've had no levy expiry, so that's a really positive direction. We are using all of our apprenticeship levy. It's a fantastic way of bringing in young people. I think the line of work that I work in, we're looking at about over 20% is of our workforce is Generation Z. So we want to look at how can we bring those into our ageing workforce, and apprenticeships have been a really positive tool in enabling us to do that. We've had over 1,200 apprenticeship starts since May 2017. So again, reflection on our commitment to developing a skilled and sustainable workforce through accessible training routes. We had a look at how can we develop the talent pathway, so working within teams, especially where there's a recruitment and retention issue, how can we utilise our apprenticeship pathway to bring in young core talent, train them for Bristol, whether they stay in the council or they expand their opportunities. In terms of diversity, it's a fantastic tool because obviously it brings in young people naturally. However, we are seeing a turn in that. We are seeing more and more people from different life experiences applying for apprenticeships. So part of that may be because we do pay the living wage. It is a competitive rate in comparison to some organisations who will pay an apprenticeship rate, which is considerably lower. So again, we're seeing the demographic of our applicants really change and diversify, which has been great, but it does come with its challenges as well, because primarily we were looking at apprenticeships as ways of being able to give opportunities for qualifications for those who do not have any or cannot go to university because of the cost of living. However, we are seeing more and more graduates apply for, especially our degree level apprenticeship. So got a little bit of challenge there, and we are working on how we can solve that. In terms of working for different, how we target different areas of Bristol, especially those in the south. We've got South Bristol with guaranteed travel later, who we do work very closely with. We also work with our corporate parenting group, so looking at how can we enable carers to we are seeing, you know, but it's been really, really good to see certain areas, especially with our recruitment and retention issues in areas like social work, environmental health, training standards, where there has been a struggle to not only recruit and retain professionals in that area. They are now looking at the apprenticeship talent pathway to bring them in, and we see that especially in our social work area. We have currently about 42 internal staff qualifying with the apprenticeship scheme to becoming fully qualified social workers, and now we're seeing that more and more in other areas as well. In terms of policy development and reform, so as you may know, there's been quite a lot of information and changes around apprenticeships. We are reacting to them as soon as possible and waiting for more information to come through. We work really, really closely with our training providers who again react to any government changes and try and work the best way possible forward because it can mean big change. For example, functional skills has been a massive blocker and challenge for a lot of people to do qualifications. Now that has been eased, that's been a really positive step for a lot of our, especially our internal staff. However, for our young people, that's still in place. We are still expecting maximum English qualifications, and if they don't come in with them, then we offer the solutions through our training providers. There's been quite a few changes and announcements regarding how we spend our apprenticeship levy. So we're getting information around boot camps, shorter apprenticeships. However, we're still waiting more information as to what that may look like, because one of our challenges are the 20% off the job. What that looks like for somebody working full time is 1 day protected study time, so away from your usual job, your roles and responsibilities. If we are looking at shorter courses, they are still looking at that 20%. So how we work that is going to be a bit of a challenge for us in the next 6 to 12 months. And I think that's about it from apprenticeships, but happy to take any questions from anyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll come back into play. Right. Right, who was first then?
Sana, thanks for that presentation. As members may know, I'm incredibly passionate in support of this. In my view, the apprenticeship initiatives we've supported have been really one of the shining examples of success for this organisation. I've got two points. The one specific to this report, the other more general. The first one, you showed graphs of the levy. It would be really helpful in future reports to see graphs of the number of new apprentices taken on. For example, the 198 in the last year, how does that compare with the year before, say, over 3 years? And are you able, sorry to put you on the spot, just to say, is it stable, is it increasing, is it what?
Yes, so at the moment it is stable. Currently we have got, I think since that report was done, we're now at about 194 new starts, so that's apprenticeship enrolments, that's people coming into the council through the apprenticeship scheme, and also our internal staff taking on an apprenticeship. For their own career and development. We are in a very positive place at the moment because we can tell that by our levy expenditure. We are currently, in the last 12 months, we spent 1.9.5 million from our levy. We have about 1.3 every year, and it changes depending on our pay. So we work on 2-year programs, anything between 2.4 and 2.6 to spend over a 2-year period. And we've got no levy expiry, it's always a positive note.
The second point is, more general, and it's not, to be honest, with reference to this committee,
Yes.
but it's something, in my view, the council needs to take account of. And I was inspired by this by what I heard at the last Harbourside Forum, which I believe Councillor Dudd also served on. And this was the boss of a specialist engineering company, which is practically cheap by Galway with the Essex Great Britain site. So they employ 160 people. They take them on primarily through apprenticeships, straight from school, but a huge number stay with them for 20, 30 years. They're an unsung success story, in my view, for Bristol. They export to 38 countries worldwide, and a large proportion of the specialist engineering is used in maritime and railway infrastructure worldwide. But they were saying they're a classic example of the type of employment sector with the, for example, changes of Bedminster, White House Street, Temple Quarter, St Philip's Marsh, which is we're losing because it's those sort of employments which are necessary and often recruit unskilled from work but trained up members of staff that are being discontinued. And I do think they were saying their major problem was actually keeping people, even those who turned up to the recruitment assessments. If they offered them a job, they said, having got past the post gate on Cumberland Road and other things, they probably won't join you. So we do need to consider the impact of our policies, sit council-wide, in my view, on employment type, apprentice type employment, but that's not something for HR, of course.
I did, sorry, did you put your hand up, Tim?
It's a follow-on.
Okay, so I've got Kelvin, then Drone, and then Councillor O'Rourke.
So I think really welcome the report. I think obviously apprenticeships are really important to support our organisation going forward. I sit on the North West NHS Trust, and also now you mentioned this is Great Britain, I sit on that as well. So just for the record, I always sort of don't declare all these things until people raise them. But the NHS is doing a massive amount of work in this space as well. I wonder if there's any coordination going on, because we're sort of potentially going after the same types of people. I know we've got in North Bristol, I know the two trusts are coming together, right? But North Bristol got something called the Anchor in the Community, and they're doing a lot of support around Southmead and going after individuals from the Southmead estate. So first of all, sort of, don't need to answer now, if we're doing any coordination, that would be sensible. Second big, and it's a bigger point for me, this one, is making sure we don't funnel. How do we ensure we don't funnel individuals from certain communities into like work only associated with their educational standards? So what I mean by that is someone's, I don't know, coming out of school with not many qualifications, we're funneling them into like manual type jobs rather than trying to get a better assessment of their ability, right, to be to take on a degree, of course, right, when they haven't got qualifications to perhaps do that. So is there any support we give individuals around their basic education needs? And so I sort of worry about some of these things. We miss talent in this process, and we end up just funneling basically working class kids into manual type roles, whereas potentially we miss the opportunity there. That's quite nuanced and difficult, I get that, but I just wonder what approaches we might. This is an opportunity to have a slightly different approach, trying to get a bit more rounded assessment of individuals, but recognising we need to be successful as well. We don't want people dropping out of degree courses and stuff. So I do get the flip side of this argument as well.
So on that point there are quite a few different things that we do. So our recruitment process is very different to our normal recruitment process for a substantive role. We look at the questions that we are asking, prompts that we give, especially when we're dealing with young people who don't this might be their first interview. So we have done
That was a loud accent.
We've done a lot of work around those interview questions, kind of how to extract information from young people in terms of what their capabilities are. So we do see the point they're making is actually quite apt, because we see this all the time, especially where you've got a family who've gone into a particular trade and this young person doesn't want to go into that. So we work really closely with the on-site construction training provider, the Bristol City Council, and we work really closely with them. We get quite a few referrals from them in terms of take this person on in carpentry, if it doesn't look like it's suitable, can we have a look at business admin as an entry point. So we do that already. We've definitely worked on our recruitment processes in terms of how are we assessing them, because it's not, although it is academic, it's not meant to be for our A-star, aspiring learners. It's meant to be for those who want to learn from reflective practice. So opposite to how you would do, learn theory and then go out to the workplace and you demonstrate how that theory now can be put into practice. That's the opposite. You learn first and then you reflect on your practice. So all that starts from the very moment we get that applicant in. We also give quite a lot of flexibility to the application. So we do use our usual recruitment processes, but how we assess that supporting information is very different to how we would do for a non-substantive post. But there is more that we can be doing.
And that coordination with
NHS. I used to be the lead for the NHS apprenticeship scheme, so we do have networks with them. It could be stronger where we do have strength with our South West councils. So we work quite closely with Gloucester, South Gloss, Wiltshire, Swindon, Somerset. We meet with them on a bi-monthly basis to share practice, but we can stand out there with other organisations. We do meet with them on a quarterly basis, all the large organisations in the South West to share practice, usually highlighting the good work and just a lot of mixed learning, collaborative work. But I can take that point going forward to it.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I'm partly following on from Calvin's point, but I think if you've got star performers, you also hope you've got the organisational flexibility to recognise them when they're actually, in a role in the organisation and give them pathways through to accelerated learning opportunities. I think there's that strand as well.
Yes.
Interesting to see that there's a kind of a smallish number of level 4 type apprentices, but growing. It would be quite interesting to hear what that changes over time, so we can see what the kind of changes on a year-by-year basis, and what the kind of the tactics are to be increasing the number of level 4s, because that then is feeding into greater opportunities for lots of people, and also for young people who don't want to take on the kind of financial burden of going to university. It is actually a great way of getting the skills that you need to thrive in the workplace without earning at the same time.
Yeah, most definitely. There seems to be more level 3, level 5 and 6 apprenticeships, and your level 4s as a bridge. One of the areas where we've taken a little bit of a hit is finance, with the level 7s being taken away from us in January 2026. Our finance had a really good pathway in terms of apprenticeships. You come in at level 2, usually 16-year-old school leavers. They then go on to do the level 4 and then level 7
what's in growth and regen. Interesting to see what the number of apprentices are as a proportion of the workforce in each of those directorates, so that you can see, which of the directorates that, is it because growth and regen have loads more employees? I assume it mainly is, but would also highlight whether there's opportunities in other directorates to increase the number of apprentices.
We can split that data up and present it next time as well.
Thank you. Dudd? Councillor O'Rourke, did you have a hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of points. One of which is I totally agree with Councillor Eddy that we do need a graph of number of apprentices over time so that we can judge whether we're in the right trajectory and not missing our targets. The other one is I'd like to make a late declaration of interest in the fact that I am a non-executive director of Goral Homes, and I'm just wondering if the apprentices that Goral Homes recruits, which is a council-owned company, is actually included in your stats.
Do they are on our payroll? So they wouldn't be, so only who contribute to the levy would the stats be counted.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you. So I think generally, following on a little bit from what Calvin said, generally a lot of people have a assumption that when it comes to apprenticeships, it will be more manual labour jobs like carpentry or plumbing and things like that. My background is law, if you don't know, I'll talk about it a lot. And before I went to university, I looked into a law apprenticeship. So my understanding of apprenticeships is actually it can be really, really wide, from very manual jobs, but to also very academic ones like law and accountancy. So I would be really interested in seeing actually what apprenticeships we actually offer. Is it just manual? Is there more academic ones as well? I think that might actually help us understand exactly as well what is interesting young people, which apprenticeships are they drawn to versus other ones. I think that would be really good. That way it also might be a good way to look at what working class kids are passionate about. Maybe it's a confidence issue about university, maybe it's a financial issue, maybe it's that they have caring responsibilities and that they can't just go and move to a university when they don't have a carer for at home. So I would be really interested in seeing, are there jobs that young people want to do that they can't do because they can't go to university, and that we could actually offer as an apprenticeship? Because there are roles that could be done as apprenticeships, but we don't offer at the moment.
And that's something we are working on at the moment. So James and I we have been looking through our talent development about certain roles and whether they can be converted into an apprenticeship, especially entry level roles. It's about that development over time. Funnily enough, manual labour is not the majority of our apprenticeships. Most of them are businesses, they're corporate apprenticeships in different areas. We also work really closely with schools because, as you can imagine, not many 16-year-olds are going to say, I want to be a trading standards officer. So what we do send out our apprentices, especially in those areas that are maybe not as visible to young people, to go and talk about career pathways and their journey about their apprenticeship, how they engage with us and the job prospects and what have you. So we do that work already through our apprenticeship network. So we're doing one side of that story. The other side, we can definitely give you a breakdown of the apprenticeships that we offer in the council. It's actually really, we get inquiries coming in saying, especially for our intern staff, through apprenticeships that we've never really engaged in before. So it is something that's emerging and growing. As the council changes and the needs of the council change, we've seen the uptake of apprenticeships in different areas, but we can present that next time as well, breakdown for you.
If that can put on the action sheet, I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions myself actually. One's on, so obviously we know we've got lots of skill gaps right across the organisation. thinking of like highways engineers and social workers. And I know we obviously engage with those services, but a lot of the management in those services are very much focused on like this year's budget and this year's budget round, whereas an investment in an apprenticeship, that's going to be several years. So how do we kind of work with those managers to get them over that short-termism, actually invest in apprentices as a way of filling the skill gap long term? And I think thinking about housing as well, like the amount, we do need a lot of manual trades as well still. But it's just getting over that mindset of, well, we've got this year's budget to fill, we've got to get somebody in this year now, but not looking ahead 2 or 3 years. So how are we kind of working with it?
That's probably going to be one of our actions in the workforce on our apprenticeship strategy. So having these conversations, it is about building trust, and social work's a really good example of it, but really, really well. We're now in our 5th year of taking on apprenticeships within social work, and it's something that we can highlight a little bit more, do case studies on it, and try and gain the trust of other areas. Training standards is one of those, massive recruitment protection issue. We were losing officers to the private sector. They decided to take the gamble on it, and it's worked out well. We'll come back next year, ask them for another 2 apprentice recruitment with their next forecast next year to take on another 2. Housing is an area that we're working closely with in terms of bringing in, again, entry-level apprentices and seeing what the next 10 years looks like. So that again is a level 2, level 3, moving on to level 5, and then going on to degree level. So offering the solutions and engaging with our managers to have, to take up the offer. There's a lot of work involved in that. Teams need to have an infrastructure, not to protect the brand of apprenticeships, because the last thing I want is to bring in a young person or an apprentice into the council where the infrastructure isn't there to support fostering and nurturing to ensure that we're building the next generation of officers. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but we can definitely do more around that.
I guess it's probably a bit of a role for this committee as well to keep an eye on that. This kind of fits into the sort of one council approach to and the workforce strategy. So if there are services that are out of line with that, then they need to be brought in line.
Yeah.
So I think, so with some of those skills gaps, we're not going to move forward unless we have apprenticeships in those services. And just the final one, and it's on the sort of level 6 apprenticeships. You said there's some issues around it. Was it level 7 then?
The level 7s are being taken away from January 2026.
Because I kind of agree with everyone that it's kind of as a route to not going to university to get a degree level, and you don't end up with all the debt. But it sounds like in some cases we're taking on people that have already got a degree and then doing a level 5 rather than someone who's gone through an alternative pathway. They're not burdened by all the debt of going to university. But we're kind of giving people a second degree or a second level 5 qualification in many situations.
So we are restricted by our fair recruitment and selection policy, which means that we can't discriminate against somebody who already has an existing degree. Because then social mobility also comes into that. We've got, especially in the private sector, we're seeing a lot of graduate schemes have gone down by about 30%. Which means that group of people are now looking at apprenticeships as a way into the workforce. So there's lots of trends going on at the moment. We're having to really, really look at what can we do to support
more a commentary on the higher education system in the country, isn't it? It's not really what it was designed to. You get a degree and then you have to go a step back to do an apprenticeship. So something's wrong with the system, isn't it?
Something's definitely wrong with the system, especially with the graduate schemes now being taken away. A lot of it's to do with AI. A lot of those essentially have jobs that are being taken over by AI, which means they don't need those jobs that were designated for the graduate schemes now being taken away. So these people do need to move somewhere. They do need to become economically active, and it seems to be a way for them to go forward.
So one more country, and then I'll move on after that.
A very small comment, which is that as much as I do believe that we should prioritise giving apprenticeships to those who are not going into university, I think it's absolutely essential that we still offer it to people who have come out of it. Every 18-year-old is, encouraged to go to university as much as possible in schools these days, so Ofsted and stuff like that. And fundamentally, not every 18-year-old picks a degree that actually they want to pursue that kind of career for the rest of their life. And actually it turns out that they might do that degree and there are no jobs in that field. And so actually making sure that these young people can still find a job and something that they like doing and want a career in is really important. And then let's not also forget, older citizens who have perhaps worked in a career for 20, 30 years, no longer find it fulfilling, perhaps it's a dying industry. We don't want to have lots of residents who are finding that they don't have any pathways because they're already educated. So I think it is good that we still make sure that it is open to people with higher education as well. As much as I agree that the prioritisation should be for those who for whatever reason don't want to go to university.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on, but thanks Sana for coming to present to us today. That's a very, very interesting topic, and I think we probably need to, I do see stuff from time to time on the internet, and I think we probably should do a bit more press and media around this, especially if young people see it in the media that, maybe the council's an option for me. When I first looked at it, I didn't know how much was going on. I thought we probably could do, but actually there's a lot going on, a lot more than I thought when I first looked at this. And just think, we need to promote what we're doing a bit more, I think. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on. So we've got item 15. So we've got Grace with us. Now, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah,
Grace.
so my name is Grace Dudd, and I work in the Equality and Inclusion team at the council, so mainly supporting externally facing partnerships. So the Race Equality Strategic Leaders Group, which I will talk to you a bit about today, and the Disability Equality Convention.
Thank you. So we've got an item on Race Equality HR Data Product, which is a bit of a bureaucratic title, isn't it?
So we circulated some papers along with this item, so I won't read the slides verbatim. I'll give you just a really high-level overview of kind of what the data product is, and then move into a summary of what we're doing for this iteration. I'm kind of in the depths of data analysis at the minute, so don't have kind of any firm outcome to share with you yet, but happy to come back to a future committee and share some of those. So I think, in a nutshell, the Race Equality Strategic Leadership Group was set up in 2015 to respond to Bristol's manifesto on race equality. That group has high-level strategic representation, so we have people like the police commander, the chief fire officer, it's chaired by Nick Hillard, and we have NHS representation on there as well. That group identified a need to understand how representative Bristol's public sector is. Obviously, our function is there to support communities, so wanting to know how representative Bristol's public sector workforce is. And there was a lack of data that showed that, a lack of collective data. So each organisation has their own kind of ethnicity data. We understand our own gross representation, but what what do we kind of look like as a collective. So in 2017, the first version of the data product was published, and then it was replicated in 2019 and 2021, and we're currently in the process of completing that process again, and it is due to be published later this year, so 2025. So we're moving into version 4. Essentially what it is in a nutshell is each organisation submits their ethnicity representation data to us, and we complete an analysis on it. So that allows us to draw averages and trends to see how represented organisations are. We collect on a number of themes, and those themes have evolved and changed between iterations, just how the data product has grown and how kind of we've been able to expand. So in the last version, which was 2021, we collected data on sickness, grievance and disciplinary processes via ethnicity, just to gain some deeper insights. We collect data on leadership, so that for Bristol City Council that includes CLB, which is our executive board, and then also board data, which is councillor data. I think it's kind of helpful to conceptualise in the way that there's kind of 3 tiers for the data. So we use Bristol Census data as a way of benchmarking. Then we use all of the data submissions to draw averages. So we have kind of cumulative data averages to understand what we look like as a collective public sector. And then each individual agency will have their own profile of the data product, which shows what each individual agency looks like in terms of ethnicity representation. I will say it's an award-winning product. It's the first of its kind. We're the only city currently, nationally, we know of that's doing it. We've had lots of interest, including from central government. The main purpose of the data product is kind of to provide a foundation to understand areas of underrepresentation. So it drives multi-agency action plans to improve representation. So in terms of timeline, I'm initially in those analysis phases, so all organisations have submitted their ethnicity data to us, and I am in the process of completing that. We hope to have a first version of the data product around September this year, and we'll be looking to publish externally around autumn. And if we could move on to the next one, please, Mark. So we made some changes for kind of this version to modernise the product and keep it kind of relevant. So in previous years we've used 2 measures of reporting, so Black, Asian and minority ethnic, and white as kind of our 2 comparison points that we use. This time round we're asking organisations to submit with like a 2 kind of pronged approach, so submit using the high level categories of Asian, Black, mixed, other, white and unknown. And then we're also asking all organisations to submit in their most disaggregated format. So, for example, in Bristol City Council, we use the 18 census ethnicity categories plus 2 others, Somali and other European. So that's for us to be able to understand how public sector organisations across the city are collecting ethnicity data, what categories they're using, how we compare with others. We use the 6 high-level categories so we can look for averages between public sector organisations, so there's still that consistency. We again are collecting data on pay bands and pay gap, so we'll be able to see a breakdown by each pay band within the council and what representation looks like in terms of ethnicity within those pay bands. Board and executive level data, this time around we're collecting applicant recruitment and retention data via ethnicity, and we're also asking all organisations to submit combined characteristic data, so we'll have data on ethnicity and disability status, and then ethnicity and sex. So not only will we be able to see, how many Asian people do you have within your organisation, but we'll be able to see how many Asian men, Asian women, etc. So we've got 12 participating agencies for this time round, so all of those organisations there are submitting their ethnicity data to us. So they span a number of sectors, including health, emergency response and criminal justice. With all of those organisations submitting their data to average that we've drawn over those ethnicities. The middle one is 2021 census data, that's normally what we use for benchmarking, but should be recognised it is 2021, so it's likely to be quite outdated now. And the right hand side is how Bristol City Council so their performance. I think you can see we're kind of mostly largely in line with what the public sector average is, apart from that Asian representative. I think that's the one that would be the most significant error. They might be subject to slight changes, we're still kind of in those analysis phases, but I guess reflections as an individual council are probably something for us to look into. And just before I wrap up, we're collecting data on how organisations are sharing their ethnicity data. So that includes reporting thresholds. So say for example in Bristol City Council our reporting threshold is 20. We have to have 20 employees of a certain ethnicity before we'll publish that data. There are 3 categories in Bristol City Council we're unable to publish because we don't have enough, because we don't meet that threshold of 20. So they are Bangladeshi, Arabic and Gypsy, Roma and Traveller. So it's not that we don't have representation from those ethnicities, it's just that they don't meet the reporting threshold of 20 in our workforce for us to be able to share. I would say in comparison with other organisations, we were the highest, so we have the kind of highest number of representation we have to have before we'll publish that data. So things like the health sector only have to have 5 employees of that ethnicity before they publish. So when we're kind of interpreting what our data looks like within a data product, I think that's an important consideration to make. In terms of the number of ethnicity categories used by an organisation as well, the highest number was 53, again that was health sectors, the lowest number was 13 and the average was 26. Bristol City Council we have 22, so we sit about that average. So that's kind of all I'm coming to kind of share today. It's just to make you aware of the data product that we kind of have the 4th iteration in development, and we really would welcome kind of interest from people if they'd like to kind of hear again once we've got those initial results and we can share some more outcomes. Happy to kind of come back to a future committee or to meet separately to talk through some of those results and how you compare.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Yeah, no, I'm really impressed with. I think it's a really high quality piece of work there. Are there any sort of recommendations that come out of the process? How does that sort of side of things work once the data is collected?
Yeah.
How are sort of policy recommendations driven?
Yes. So the work is resourced and delivered via the Race Equality Strategic Leadership Group. Attached to that group is the Race Equality Practitioners Group, which Steph chairs, and we really see that as being kind of like the operational arm to the Strategic Leaders Group. So what will happen once we have the data is we'll analyse it all together, making kind of multi-agency action plan, but it's likely within that kind of setting we'll also look at our own Bristol City Council data and probably formulate some actions from there. So if you like, we can bring that as maybe a policy paper or something like that to a future meeting.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. Kelvin?
I just, it's great, it's a great piece of work, and any learning we get from the work is really important. You kind of embed it through here, so I think what you just said, which is great. But I just want to have we ensure that, so the 2 hospital trusts, right, they make up 27,000 of the staff, the 56,000. They are by far dominated in terms of the numbers of, and of course the thing about that is they attract talent right across the country into the organisation. Not to say that we don't attack, we have people come back. I mean, it's just like there's so much churn, and they're attracting individuals right across the country for quite important roles. So we just wonder how we ensure that they don't skew the data when it comes to looking at, what it means for us. It's a small organisation, but we're quite big organisations still in this patch. with 7,000 staff, right? I was wondering, how do we make sense of the data when it equates to our cohort of individuals who are raised time?
It's a really good point. So for this version, so previously, and the one that was shared was kind of in a PDF report format. This version we're looking to do on Power BI, so it's kind of a dynamic dashboard that's a bit more kind of interactive rather than being a static report. What I've embedded for this time around is sector filtering. So essentially you can filter by, is it the health sector, is it criminal justice or emergency response. So given that, you should also be able to remove those sectors. So you're completely right, like one of those organisations is 14,000 people, so such a massive part of the cohort. So we hope this version will be a bit more modernised and we should be able to kind of have those additional layers. So we'll be able to kind of, remove that sector filtering to get some more results. But,
Councillor Beaton now.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the breadth of how much you've looked into this. I think it's really good to see, especially with the influx of some Ukrainian refugees and stuff like that. We're not just looking at quantities, just everything. It's really important to make sure that refugees from other European countries are also considered and aren't just lumped in with British nationals who are white. So I really appreciate that as well.
Thank you, Paul.
I think it's sort of developing more what you said already, but reading the report for 2021, it's fascinating. You just get stuck into it and it's so rich. But there are some red flags going through it, and I'm wondering how, it's not really a question for you, Grace, it's more a question I think for Steph or for James. It's a fantastic piece of data, great information, but I think what I'm sort of referring to is, if there was a one-sheet overview of here are the areas where we really need to develop. And my question, which I'm coming to, is between 2021 and now, how much do people in the organisations realise where there are issues or problems or underrepresentation and things that they need to ameliorate? Would they know about this data and have they been doing something about it? Or are you just going back out and saying, God, give me your data again now? Do you see what I'm saying? So, for example, what it sticks to me is that I have a background in education, and if we collected a lot of data like this, then you suddenly realise that your boys are not getting the right levels of C's at GCSE or something, and then everybody goes, right, let's do something about the boys so that they get better GCSEs. How have we been doing that?
So I think we, as we bring regularly to HR committee, we constantly look at our own data. So it's not a static piece of work for us. So we regularly report on our diversity within the workforce through KPIs or through reports here at committee. I think for certain ethnic categories here, there's clearly we've got some diversity gaps, and that's really what we're trying to address as part of our refreshed workforce strategy.
But the wider, the 12 other organisations, that's where it's very interesting.
Yes.
And also something that's been brought up about the holding companies, the tech companies. Bristol Waste, they didn't have any data on these questions actually in 2021. And I wonder what we're doing about those sort of outside things.
Yeah, and I think this is the beauty of a project like this is it helps us look upwards and outwards, and we're not just looking internally at what we can do. So as much as comparing our data, it's also learning from those other organisations what initiatives that they've got going on that we might be able to learn from and do something different. And as Grace said, the basic quality practitioner group brings together HR and quality professionals across the city and public sector areas, and we often deep dive into certain areas where we can learn about what is and isn't working. So we've been quite active in that space. So
it's not just sitting on a shelf somewhere, it is driving change.
Absolutely, but we recognise we've got more to do, and it's learning from those other organisations to help us.
Just to add to Steph's point, on one of the slides I think I shared a selection of outcomes, and all organisations who have participated have shown tangible improvements to diversifying their workforce. So because we can look at trends between the iteration. between the iterations, we can see, are you going up or down in terms of different ethnicities and things like that. So kind of the data is there to show whether improvements are being made. And I think those kind of the 2-year gaps between iterations previously, that's been the time to kind of develop the interventions and affect change. So yeah, all organisations participating have shown improvement between iterations, but it's been a couple of years since the past one. And I think because we've made this shift to different ethnicity categories, we have noticed organisations have struggled with that. So they can share a lot more with those reporting thresholds when it was just Black, Asian and minority ethnic and white. Now we're going more granular. Actually, there's been a lot of challenges in terms of what they can share because they just don't have the representation. So I think it's been kind of a hard shift in some ways, but we'll give lots of valuable learning from it. So yeah.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, I've had a lot of issues recently with the categorisation of white Irish. Whereas a lot of people, because I'm quite involved in an Irish group, and a lot of people say, no, I can't take white Irish because, you know, I'm not white. I identify as Irish, but I'm not white. You know, so the more granular, the more we're trying to do, the harder it gets in the way.
Definitely, and I think what our kind of initial results show is that all public sector organisations are using different approaches. So we're all, when someone is asked what their ethnicity is, they believe either see 53 options, 13 options, 26 options, and there's actually not any consistency across Bristol's public sector. So that's one of the learnings that we'd really like to take from it, is that one, we get consistency. Two, are organisations doing it better than others, and what can we kind of learn from them and how people identify. And I think what's also challenging is, net migration is changing how Bristol looks. So actually, are we updating those ethnicity categories to match what Bristol looks like? So, yes.
Really sorry, I have another meeting that I have to get to, so I apologise, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Were there any other indications on this item? No? Okay, well thanks, Grace, for coming along. It's really appreciated. Thank you. So we're on our final item now. It's the HR dashboard overview. Are you driving this one? James, are you? Double that. Okay.
And what we've attempted to do, given that this is our AGM, we've kind of zoomed out somewhat from our usual level of detail. But this set of slides gives a flavour of where we are on various specific bits and pieces. And I guess it would be helpful to have feedback from members, because we come to each meeting with various dashboards. It would be helpful to have that feedback so that we can make sure that we're covering the things that people want us to cover.
Thank you.
So, our workforce as a whole is just under 7,000. That people, that excludes agency workers and interns, which bubbles somewhere between 200 and 250. It varies, obviously, some of them are quite short term, but they're not around for long. In terms of posts, that's nearly 6,000 posts. In the last 12 months, you'll see that we've had more starters than we've had leavers. We continue to work hard, not just on recruitment, but also on retention as well. There is an obvious link between the two. Sickness absence, the number of working days lost has decreased by 7.1% during the course of the year. And turnover is now, external turnover, so that's where people leave Bristol City Council altogether, is running at 9%. Within the council, in the last 12 months, 14% of people moved between roles. That's something that, within reasonable limits, we obviously wish to encourage, because that enables people to develop their careers or sometimes move from one career to another one with us. So those are some of the key.
Chair, sorry, just a technical question. So I've seen turnover calculated differently. Is that 9% of our total workforce need every year?
So yes, so we take an average, the number of employees at the beginning and the end of the year, and the 9% is the number who've left, as expressed as a percentage of that average.
So just to do with that, based on 5 years. Yeah, that's fine. I understand.
The trend over the period that we've been using this particular software, it is shown, as you can see, it gradually diminished during the COVID years, has gradually increased post-COVID.
Could I just, sorry, just ask one query there. I'm assuming the main trough, shall we say, was during the period of the jobs freeze. But there's obviously back in 2002, blip 1, blip 2, been quite a deep reduction. Do we know what that's to do with?
It's not unusual to see a significant reduction in March of each year. There may be some budget-related reasons why those, because, for example, if you have people on fixed-term contracts, traditionally those can tend to end at a particular point, and so that you can see a sharp sort of spike or decrease in the line of that. On the next slide, we look at the trend in relation to starters and leavers. Starters are the blue line and the sort of gold line, is it?
Yeah.
Other leavers, and that has, over the same period as the previous slide, that they have started to cross. So our key performance indicators, the average number of working days lost to sickness is now 9 days per employee. That's down from 9.5 days a year ago. Turnover has also diminished overall from nearly 12% in 23-24 down to the present, down to 9.4 in 2025. We have made some marginal gains in terms of representation of young people amongst our workforce. As you can see from the slide, we've still some way to go to match the figure for quite a young city. The race pay gap has improved significantly over the time that this API has been in existence. We started at over 15% nearly 10 years ago. We're now down to 6%, and of course further distance to travel there. The gender pay gap has made a small change, a nosedive perhaps, and has increased. There will be a significant amount of work focused on that through the action plan that will accompany the workforce strategy.
Justin,
Can I just ask a question? Richard and I did I believe it was with Richard, a dismissal around an absentee, and one of the key things that came out of that was a very, very high level of long-term, this was over a period of 16 years, and it was a bit of a wake-up call for us. And I'm looking at that figure down to 9 now for sickness absence. Are we as an organisation actually keeping an eye on where we have problematic absentee within. I mean, the thing that we brought out of this example was it was over a very long period of time, and actually, as a committee, we felt it should have been addressed earlier with that individual, because they should have never got into that position. And is even 9 is it seems to me to be quite high. But I just wanted to find out whether you are actually looking at the trends across the organisation and working with employees at an earlier stage.
Before James answers, just like to specifically raise that issue so he is aware of it.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair. My colleagues in the HR team on the monthly cycle are monitoring all sickness absence across the organisation. We have within our sickness policy, our supporting attendance policy, a number of trigger points, and those are used or should be used by managers as a guide as to when to pick up conversations with colleagues about attendance levels. Of course, we do return to work discussions, as those every time someone returns from a period of absence, that should be happening. Those meetings at the random trigger points should be a bit of a zoom out to say, well, actually, over this period of time, and like you say, that could be over a period of years, this is the level of attendance that we've seen. What is it that we can do to improve that? So yeah, I can absolutely assure you that that is going on, and my HR colleagues have prompted managers where perhaps people, for one reason or another, haven't had those types of conversations recently, and it will not be the last time that the Appeals Committee receives business as a result of that activity.
But if I can come back to you, thank you very much for your response. I would never ever want to be sitting on a committee where we are hearing that situation. I mean, we don't need to go into circumstances, but it was a very long, I mean, we're talking, as you know the circumstances, a very, very long time. And it was a very, very high level. And I was gobsmacked. I mean, that's not a very technical term, but we should never, ever, as an organisation, put an employee in that position where, because they were frankly shocked at what happened to them, and we should never be seeing that within the organisation. So I hope that we never have that particular circumstance. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take it in, but then I'm going to let you finish the presentation. Get to the end.
In terms of ethnic diversity of our leadership, and when we say senior leaders, we mean the chief executive, the executive directors, and heads of service. So those are people like myself that report to directors. So ethnic minority senior leadership was 10% in 24-25, which sadly is down from nearly 15% in 22-23. So we have some work to do there to increase diversity. And last but by no means least, representative of disabled people amongst that senior leadership cohort dropped to just under 7%, down from over 12% in 22-23. So we've work to do both in terms of encouraging colleagues to declare their equalities information, as we do have a lot of gaps, but also to do more to ensure that we have short lists that we're promoting from within, encouraging development and all that good stuff. And as you see, this is the final slide, is it?
The last one.
So this is a summary of our current pay gap information. As you'll see, it's the race pay gap that is the largest, but the gender has been up. And on that final slide, that further questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just a quick comment. From all the sort of leadership ethnic and disability reps, which was useful on the sample size, that's only the executive director is 10 people, it's almost not much important. So that was just a comment. And my question was around retention. Is it any particular, is it social workers? Is there any particular group that you should particularly worry about?
I'll take the first question first, if I may, Chair. So I would say it's around about 100 people. So directors, exec directors, chief exec, that's more than 20, plus probably around about 80 heads of service, something like that. So it's around 100, which would be useful in future to note that, if we can include that when we're into next part. And on part 2, we've not noticed any particular sort of, roles or career pathways where attrition is greater than others. I guess naturally, and perhaps one would expect that those that we regard as hard to fill, which is probably less than 10 role types across the organisation, those do see slightly higher attrition. But as I say, that's not entirely surprising.
Two things, James. Firstly, sickness absence. Obviously, it's marginally decreased down to 9, which is still significantly above the employment average. But obviously, we've got to take into account there's people like, for example, working in adult social care who have muscular issues. So is there a more appropriate comparator, like for example the core cities?
Perhaps when we do our deep dive around sickness absence, we'll bring some of the Infinistats data, which is a local government association sponsored data product, I guess is the word, and that enables us to do quite a comparison across an increasing number of councils, not just in London but across the country. So that could include the core cities. I would say that generally speaking, we are not doing badly at around 9.5. I've seen some other local authorities at significantly higher levels. I accept the premise that if one looks at the whole economy, or especially the non-public sector, it has increased in recent years. It used to be around 5 days. It's probably nearer 7 now, but it does vary. Sickness policies have of course changed. The employment bill, looks to employment rights bill wants to make further change in that space. And we are fortunate in local government that for some historical reasons, our national terms and conditions, except where managed properly by managers, they are relatively generous compared with other organisations. I'm not saying I'm not making any judgmental comment there. I think there are many cases that come to our attention in HR which totally merit the people having very serious illnesses, and it's absolutely right that we should do the most to support them in their recovery, which in some cases can be a sustained period of time.
Thank you. Second one was definitely diversity in leadership. I must say this really surprises me, this decline. Certainly in homes and housing delivery, which I'm most okay with, it seems to be going in the right direction in a way. But I accept Tim's point, right, we're looking perhaps at a small complement, of course, so it may be disproportionate, but that's something which does surprise me, I must say.
I think possibly it could be that because some current roles, particularly in the housing area, are covered by interim managers. Of course, they're not reflected in this data, and the permanent appointments will be underway quite shortly. And as early we continue to at least attempt to hold our search agencies' feet to the fire in terms of ensuring that in their search activities they are making sure that they provide us with a
I'm
true
sure James speaking was rely upon to ensure against torture and pain.
I'm sorry, I wanted a poor choice of phraseology on my part. Hold to account those search agencies in terms of making sure that there are diverse shortlists to put before our selection committees.
Right, okay. Rob and then Calvin.
Thanks, Joe. Jim, going back to the comment you made about having a conversation about sickness absence. Sadly, as you know, based on what Councillor Clark says, that there's one really surprising here, that, to be quite honest, is there's still areas of the council where, from what the better description, they're still stuck in the dark ages, and especially when it comes to things like women's health. So can you give a commitment that we can maybe start on a piece of action about being proactive rather than reactive, and managers not jumping straight to the policy and issuing sickness warnings, in that, that conversation is held and in an informal manner if necessary, using their discretion rather than being punitive to employees. Because something needs to change, and that figure, I would say, go down much, much more if goes back to the conversation about being proactive, not reactive, like I've already said. So would you give commitment to that side of things? How you go about it, I don't know, but whether it's publishing articles or anything like that to try and drive him. We've got some great managers, don't get me wrong, I don't want to criticise all of them. But there are some, quite frankly, they might be good at managing in the 1970s, but this day and age is, quite frankly, frightening.
Chair, I would tend to agree that we do have what one might call a broad church in terms of managerial capability in the organisation. I think the recent leadership conferences, 2 were held last week, 1 being held next week, are a great solid start to engaging with parts of the organisation that perhaps we haven't invested in enough over the years. I'm fortunate that as a head of service, along with staff and directors and other heads of service, we meet collectively on a monthly basis. These conferences are the first time for many years that we have sort of delved deeper. Yes, there's a limit to what one can cover in a morning, but I think that's a good start. And I just go back to the case that Councillor Clark was referring to, and I don't know all of the particulars, but I do know that for some managers, in situations like the case that Councillor Clark was referring to, it's only when the appeals committee sort of did that zoom out and said, well, look at all this absence, year upon year of high absence. I think the manager may have thought that actually they were doing the right thing by, giving the employee another chance, but quite quickly you can have a cumulative amount of absence that's quite astonishing. So it's about striking a balance, and I agree that whilst the conferences are a start, there are other ways that we need to engage with leaders across the organisation to make sure that those one-to-one conversations are actually happening, and happening in a human way rather than a sort of robotic, policy-driven type way.
Thank you. Calvin?
I just wondered, we also do exit interviews next week, and with these drops, particularly interested to know why we're losing individuals. These are relatively small numbers in the scheme of things, but going from disability from 7 people from 12 to 7 people, and roughly we all have reasons for that. I just wanted to make sure we get any themes associated with that. What we want to do is ensure that we are understanding the reasons why and there's a clear justification for it, and we're not using disabled senior leaders in the organisation because they're fed up with the organisation.
We certainly have an exit survey, and for as much as we hope that people will be honest and open about their reasons for leaving, we review that regularly, but sort of I look at it monthly. Any cases, they are anonymous, but one can make educated guesses as to where they might be coming from, and some people give a lot of detail in their comments, and that's very useful and enables me and my HR colleagues to have conversations with the relevant director and just make sure that they're aware that this situation, obviously the trouble with the exit data is they've gone and it's almost too late to retain, but it is useful for us to know what's really happening in places and to bring that to the leaders' attention in those areas so they can take action to try and prevent whatever it is that's happening.
Okay, thank you. I've got callers. Is there anyone else? Because I'm going to close the meeting after.
I just wanted to come back on what was saying, James. All too often I have members saying to me, my manager says HR have told them they have to do this, and I think that might be where you need to start, because I don't think always another one is necessary. People know, I think that I know if I've had because I'm using difficulties, etc. I don't need to be given a warning. I know I've been off for a long time, but I think sometimes possibly the advice your colleagues are giving is a bit too policy-led and not discretion-led, which the policy gives the discretion, but managers are too happy to be able to say, HR said I want to do this.
Chair, I would say, I would observe that, I regularly speak to my team and I think, more or less, I think we're on the same page, and that it is that human element of not being robotic about it. I was reading something earlier, why someone was suspended or whatever, and it was, HR said, and there's a lot of HR said that goes on in the organisation, and often HR didn't say that at all. They gave the manager, their analysis of the scenario and gave them, the various options that were open to them. The manager considered that and took the option. And if we're concerned about that, we escalate it. Not always do we know what a manager has then done. So it is sort of two sides of the same coin. I accept that I need to make sure that my people are on the right page. But we are, as Mark Williams used to say, very much in HR as the sort of the jam in the sandwich. And people will use us on both sides. Saying yes, HR said this.
Yeah, I'm only aware of the cases that come to me, into my branch, and I won't get the stuff that comes to his branch, his union. I imagine there's lots of other cases that we never hear about.
Potentially so.
Thank you.
Conversation about before, so.
I had someone sneak in, so.
I just think, I used to be HR, not HR, trade union rep like you guys, and whilst it's absolutely, we have to treat people just fairly, the whole system needs to be transparent, because I used to get complaints about people who accuse other members of this.
Yeah, that's well.
And the impact of them having to deal with their staff is significant as well. So they would also get fed up when those principles weren't given to me. So I'm for a bit of flexibility, but also to provide them when those things weren't administered rigorously and fairly across.
Yeah, or not to be seen to be fair. Often it's because they don't have the underlying story on the side. That's usually a mitigating circumstance.
Okay. Well, I'm going to close the meeting now, so thank you, everybody.
Any other business?
There's no other, any other business?
Well, can I say something?
Go on.
I'd just like to go back to the public forum questions, and I would like to ask that the committee is emailed with some information about, so that we could better understand the chronological events that happened around when did the selection committee meet, for example, about the regrading of the just so that, I mean, if assertions are made in this committee and committee members don't take them any further, I think that's remiss of us. So I would just like to have that information. To supply that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, meeting closed.